please join me in welcoming the Premier of Manitoba, the Honourable Brian Pallister.
Dan, thanks so much. Can you put your hands together and thank the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce for the work they've done in hosting this event, please? It's also kind of remarkable to think that this facility wasn't even here a few months back, right? It's a beautiful facility, and the people who work here did a tremendous job of serving us this meal today, and I think we should show our thanks to them too. Please. Thank you. So I'm at a reception the other night, and a lady is coming towards me across the floor, and she stops and she looks up, and I look down, which is kind of happens at those events, and she says, "I have a question for you." And I'm anticipating the answer is 6'8", because that's the most common question I get at receptions. But the question was, how are you doing it? How are you doing it? And I said, well, what are you meaning? She said, well, for years, here in Manitoba, we've had the deficits have gone higher, the taxes have gone higher, and the wait times for health have gotten longer, and you're doing the opposite of that, so how are you doing it? It's a good question. So today I'll try to answer it, giving you 5 examples, and I'll also tell you why we're doing it. So progress report, fixing the finances after a decade of debt. How do you fix the finances? Well, we're fixing them. We're fixing them carefully, and we're fixing them gradually, but we're fixing them. And 2 weeks ago, we got the first positive appraisal by a bond rating agency in 20 years from Dominion Bond Rating, saying we're doing what we promised we'd do, and we have a credible plan. Anybody here borrow money? You want to have a good relationship with the bond rating institutions and the banks. Solidifying our borrowing power is really important in this province with the amount of debt we have. So fixing the finances, at the same time repairing the services, because as we know, we were last in many things, last in education, measured 10th on our kids' scores in schools. We're working on that, and I'll talk more about that later. Canadian Institute of Health Information released a study just last week that said that in 9 provinces in Canada, the wait times have gotten longer. We weren't one of those. We're the only province where the wait times for emergency health care have gotten shorter. That's pretty powerful stuff. %25 shorter at ERs, about the same for personal care home entry, and we're working on knees and hips too. So the economy, lots to do. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business. So now I've said that, I have to put a plug in for joining the chamber. The chamber guys won't be happy with me mentioning the other. So I'll just say this. Join the chamber. If you're not a member, join the chamber. Join the Winnipeg Chamber. Join the Manitoba Chamber. Get involved in your Chamber of Commerce. They're incredibly effective. We work with them and we value their input. Let's give a round to the Manitoba Chamber while we're here, and the Winnipeg Chamber one more time. Over the last 2 years, StatsCan says one province has led in vehicle sales, one province has led in commercial real estate investment increase, one province has led in farm gate receipts, but I'll give somebody else credit for that. One province has led in average weekly wage growth, and one province has also led in private sector capital investment. For the first time in our history, that's Manitoba. #1 in every one of those categories, thanks to you. But it's not enough, and more needs to be done, more on that later too. So how are we doing it is a fair question, but let's start with how we're not doing it. I'm going to address some myths now. One of those myths is out there. There was reference earlier to advertising. I like advertising. I like it when it's true. The myth of layoffs is a myth. 1/5 of 1%. That's the number of people that have been laid off, most of them in management. Too big at the top in management. Any business school graduate knows governments grow. They're good at growing, and they grow especially large at the top. We had to shrink the top of our organization, and we have. We've also shrunken the overall size of our organizations, and we've done that by about 8% over the last 2.5 years, but we've not done it with layoffs. We've done it with retirements. The myth of layoffs is just that. The myth I want to also address is the myth of spending cuts. People like to use the word cuts, in particular some public sector unions and political opponents like to say cut, 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 that's all they say. $700 million more for health in this year's budget than 2 years ago. $1.4 billion more in health, families, and education than 2 years ago. Doesn't sound like a cut to me. We're investing in the most compassionate departments of government because we are demand-driven in those portfolios. And we have the fastest growing population in Canada, and we need more investments in schools and in education, and we're making those investments. We're making the investments that need to be made to grow our province. No such thing as cuts. The other myth is the myth of austerity. In particular, that's been mentioned a couple of hundred times. You probably read it. Austerity means bitter and bleak. I was lost in the desert a year ago, thirsty and cold. That was austere. When the searchlight came on, that wasn't. We're the searchlight. You're the searchlight. We're working together. When you're lost, it's austerity. But when you're finding your way, that's progress. We're making progress, thanks to you. Right direction? Yep, for sure. How? Well, Bill Gillespie, if any of you had the privilege of knowing Mr. Gillespie, you knew a gentleman. And Bill Gillespie was a successful business person, a great community person, and a wonderful advisor to me in my early days after I started my business. I went to see Bill, and I asked for his advice. And he said, "Young man, pay attention to the small stuff, because if you don't, it can be big stuff that's bad." Great advice. So, number one on the hows, do the right things, and do them right. Let me give you an example of how not to do something right. Westburn. How many of you know where Westburn is? Northwest of Portersville Prairie on the Yellowhead route. It's a little village. Took swimming lessons there about 100 years ago. In the White Mud River, the government wanted some land at Westburn. They wanted land, the infrastructure department wanted it so they could widen the turn on the highway at that beautiful little village. What's wrong with that? Well, here's what's wrong. They commissioned a study, an appraisal, an evaluation. They had to get ready for an assessment. They had to bargain. They had to negotiate. They had to get that land from that farmer that owned it. What's the problem with that? Well, the whole thing cost $34,000. And the land, which was about a sixth the size of this hall, was worth less than $500. That's the kind of stuff that we shouldn't be doing. I hope you'd all agree. And I want you, with the concerned looks some of you have, to know that we're not doing that now. And we've improved our systems of land management. The problem is, if you wanted, for example, to buy land from the Crown, say to expand, say for a recreational property, or to expand a small business, or to expand a farm, if you wanted to do that, you could apply. And 90% of the time, you'd get a no. But it would take, on average, 5 years to get a no. This is not how we run a business. It's not how we should be running a government department either, and we're not. GPS locators were put on government vehicles not quite 2 years ago. GPS locators have resulted in a decline in the number of government vehicles of 20%, which is bumper to bumper from here to where Broadway hits Portage Avenue over there. Bumper to bumper, less government vehicles with a savings of over 10% on fuel, which is also good for the environment. These are the things that needed to be done years ago, but weren't. They're getting done now. Little things add up. Pineland Nursery, Pineland Nursery was producing seedlings at double the cost of private sector competition and losing $500,000 a year doing it. Not anymore. Clean up the little things. Do the little things right. 2, forget ideology and focus on results. So, public-private partnerships were essentially banned by legislation that was enacted some years ago. But yet, public-private partnerships are in use around the country and virtually every other province. Public-private partnerships result in innovative approaches, capital is extended, you can renew your infrastructure, they're an effective tool. We looked at them, we took a serious look at them because we're playing catch up with schools and we needed to build some new schools. We didn't go with them, but we learned from the exercise enough that we're building 7 schools now at the cost of 5. 3 Ps will be good for us for the future, but they would have meant a delay of over 2 years in getting the schools built that our kids need and deserve to have so they can get educated. Retail cannabis. Previous government was going to have the government deliver that service. I believe that we've got the best of both worlds with our model. Our model involves the private sector doing what it does well, with the government doing what it should do well, which is regulate and control and organize the purchase in this case as well. And we're the envy of other provinces when it comes to selling cannabis. Some of you, I can tell, have mixed feelings about that, and others have probably an appetite for Christmas candy right now. I don't know. Just saying. We're in the business, and we need to get the black market out of the business, but the public sector won't do that. The private sector will. But I want to tell you about air ambulance. It's not an ideological issue. It's being made one, but it's not. If it was an ideological issue, 7 other provinces wouldn't have all decided. NDP governed, Liberal governed, doesn't matter. They've decided that the public sector doesn't need to run air ambulance. The private sector, through a tendering process, is running it in those provinces. In our province, it's been run by the public sector. Here's one example of how it's been run. Say you have a bariatric patient, and I'm told that this is a term that applies to people like me when they need to be hauled. Well, oversized patients, big people, need to be hauled in a plane for medical treatment. How's that work? Badly. What happens is the air transport people call up a company. That company goes to Thompson to be outfitted with the equipment. Well, they pick up the equipment and bring it back to Winnipeg where it's installed. Then they go to Island Lake to pick up their patient. Then they bring the patient back, and then they deinstall the equipment and take it back up to Thompson. Sound efficient to you? Over $40,000 every time for one patient. 200 times last year that service was needed. Now, you put that requirement into a tender, and you'll get that service delivered effectively by the bidders. How do I know? Coast to coast, it's getting done. Medical transportation is important, and it's important we do it well and protect the safety of patients, but it's important we get value for money when we do it too. The previous system had no standing orders, no safety standards. You paid more for less because, well, you didn't use the private sector for what it's designed to be used for, which is to provide better services more effectively at lower cost to the customer. We weren't doing that. We are going to be doing that now. 3, build a new culture, a winning culture. So any business school grad knows Drucker, and they know Peter Drucker said, what, culture eats strategy for lunch. Doesn't matter what your strategy is if your team isn't attuned to the goals that you have. They don't share your mission. If they haven't got a picture of where they want to go, your company's not going anywhere. Well, it probably is going nowhere. So how do you change the culture in an organization? That's a tricky one, isn't it? How many of you were at the IDEA dinner? Ariana Huffington was the guest speaker. Put up your hand if you were there. Okay. She's a wonderful woman, an accomplished woman. Of course, the founder of Huffington Post has now sold it. Now she's a guru for quality of life and a very impressive person and has accomplished. Anyway, she said to me, Premier, what is giving you the greatest joy in your job? It's a great question, right? Who have you ever met that was excellent at their job that didn't find joy in it? Who didn't have passion for what they were doing? And I said, straight away, the Civil Service Transformation Fund is really exciting to me. And she said, what's that? And I said, well, it's basically, unlike typical budgeting processes that you manage at the top of the organization, we allocated $20 million to projects that we wanted civil servants, public servants, to suggest to us, right? Come forward, give us ideas. What do you think we could do and change to make a better service happen? And what could we do to save money as well? Some of my friends in the private sector laughed at me and said, civil servants don't care. I said, that's not been my experience. And it was borne out because 30 days later, we had over 50 applications, of which we have implemented almost all of them, each with a business plan attached, and each with a return on investment that will mean that that $20 million will save, over the next 5 to 10 years, over $250 million. So I say thank you to civil servants. So Ariana looks at me and says, so you're telling me that you asked people at the front line for ideas and they gave you ideas? And I said, yes. And she said, well, duh, we knew that would work, didn't we? Except we're the only province doing it. The only province doing it. And I'd say there's a future for it. So I'm here today to tell you we're putting 20 million more into projects civil servants are going to design to make your public sector work better, because they have the answers. 20 million more. I'm not going to hit you with the whole 50, but I got to tell you some of the ideas they came up with. Here's one: job classification cleanup. Okay. We have in the civil service of Manitoba over 700 different job classifications. 700, of which 173 are not currently used, like hatchery helper and I guess spittoon inspector, I don't know. They're just amazing. Replicas of the remnants of the past. All these job classifications, all designed so people be put in a tube so they can't have fun expanding what they're doing and learning more about it. So, civil servants said, that's not what we want. We're going to clean that job classification system up. Online applications. You might think that we're all electronic now, like your businesses, but we're not. We have over 82,000 last year handwritten applications. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates. And with all due respect to the people that fill out those forms, they make a lot of mistakes. So we need to clean up that system. Error rates will drop as we do that. Efficiencies will increase. People who need to apply for other government benefits and so on will benefit from the improvements in that system. Email, bulk office, back office emails. We have lots of little units, and it's cost prohibitive for them to make technological advances and improvements. But if we bring them together, if we unify them, we can increase our ability to provide better services at lower cost. This is, I know, common sense to most of you, but you know, yesterday's innovative thinking, I guess, is today's common sense. We need to adapt. Signatures. So crop inspectors go out to farms all over Manitoba to, well, inspect crops, hence the job description. And they go and they meet with the farmer or farmers, and they inspect the crops in the field to see if they are worthy of a crop insurance claim. Good so far. Then they go back to Portage la Prairie, where the head office is, and they prepare their report. And then they go back to Pearson or Onanol or Vita, and they get a signature. Seriously. We needed to go to the frontline civil servants to find answers to these questions. These are the little things that we have to get right, and by going and asking for help, we've got that help. There are so many more examples like this, and you've already thanked these civil servants, but I want to thank them too personally in advance, because I know that they're here with you today. They don't want to be identified because they're part of teams. And those teams are accomplishing great things for you by making government work better for you, and I know you'd like to show your thanks to them and to the teams they're part of and are building right now in your civil service. So, my buddy Glenn is driving the car, and we're going up to Dauphin to see Ryan and Margot get married. These are basketball buddies of mine years ago, but I'll never forget it. Drove up through the park, riding mountains, a beautiful drive. Glenn said he knew where we were going, and we had about 15 minutes to get to the wedding by the time we got to the outskirts of Dauphin. The third time by the cenotaph, I realized that Glenn didn't have a clue where the church was. We had 15 minutes at the start, but we had about 4. And I turned to Glenn and I said, Glenn, maybe we should stop and ask for directions. We're not that lost yet. He actually said that, okay? Some guys won't ask for directions. Even now, what do they, shut off the GPS, I guess? I don't know what happens. He would not ask. Finally, he did, and we did get there. But the point is, and this is number 4, ask for help. Be smart enough to know, and be humble enough to know you don't have all the answers. And if you do that, listen to the advice you get. And that's what we've been doing as a government. We've been listening. We had over 35,000 Manitobans last year participate in our pre-budget exercise. We listened, and we're acting on the advice. Now, not everybody's advice, because if we always agree with each other, then some of us aren't thinking. But we have different points of view at times, but we're listening, and we're listening to people who know and who give us valuable advice. This is how we designed our Climate and Green Plan. It was designed by thousands of Manitobans over a year and a half. It's a great plan. It will advance us as the greenest of provinces, and I think we're all proud of that. We need to maintain that reputation and invest in green for us and for our children as well. Thank you. And I'm going to mention these as well because the Chambers of Commerce were a key to this, but the Look North strategy, and Chuck Davison is here. Chuck heads the Manitoba Chamber, as you know, and Chuck and the OCN chief, Christian Sinclair, co-chaired that exercise. And I just want to say to both of those gentlemen and the hundreds of people that they consulted with on the development of our North strategy, I want to say thank you to them. I want to say thank you, Chuck, and I want to say thank you, Christian, for your chairing of those committees. The Golden Boy looks north for a reason. We have to make sure that reason is valid. And I think with the planning and the work that we've done together as partners, we're better positioned than ever before to take advantage of those opportunities. We can face the challenges we have. Yes, we lead the country in many social challenges. That means we should lead the country in finding solutions to those social challenges, whether it's meth or poverty, you name it. We have the advantage of having a concentrated area. Some used to call it a disadvantage. I don't see it that way. More people in our capital region than any other province, right, as a percentage of the total population. People dedicated, like you, to giving back. People who care. People who lead the country, frankly, in charitable giving. Lead the country in volunteerism. These are things we should treasure and take advantage of, and we are by listening. But we need to continue to do that with this meth situation and other situations as they arise. We need to keep listening to one another and then focusing our actions based on that listening. I want to also say, being humble enough to listen means recognizing that there are people who have global expertise. And we need to listen to them too. And so we have. We've invested. We've invested in consulting, whether it's Pricewaterhouse. Oh, I better not start. I'll just say, firms that know about best practices, that understand, because they've looked at the global situation, how we can become the best at what we do. And I would defend this because we have taken some criticism for doing this, for reaching out and asking for expertise and asking for advice, which I think is misplaced. You know, they asked, or Abraham Lincoln once said, if you give me 2 hours to cut down a tree, I'll take 1 of those hours and sharpen my axe first. So running off madly in all directions, reacting to challenges is not how you get better results, is it? And you all know that. But we need to understand that investing in expertise is important, shapes our future. We've spent less on private consulting firms that are helping us with procurement strategies, economic development, which I'll speak of in a second, reforming our health system, reforming our child care system. For the first time in almost 20 years, we have fewer children in state care this year than last. Getting progress made on these files is absolutely essential, and the expertise that we've commissioned is helping us do that. The total bill so far is less than the previous government spent on 6 different untendered contracts for orange flood-fighting bags that they purchased without a tender. So I would suggest this investment that we're making in expertise has a higher payback than that one does. In terms of the last point I would make, I think all of these measures are good for cleaning up the operation, and I hope in sharing some of these with you that you appreciate this is hard slogging, and this is one thing at a time. This isn't just $10 million decisions. It's thousands upon thousands of $50,000 decisions. It's the hard work of getting your finances strong. The hard work you do in your businesses, the hard work every family in this province has to do, the government has to do too. But it really doesn't matter unless you grow the economy, does it? So that's the key. That's the key, growing the economy. When we formed government, we inherited an outdated patchwork of over 80 different programs that the government had been investing in, ostensibly to grow the economy. The need for a new approach was fairly obvious. We commissioned Deloitte to look at globally what worked best, and we then decided that we would focus on the Manitoba-specific advantages we needed to build on, and I asked Barb Gammy and Dave Angus to co-chair that exercise, and they are here today, and they've worked so hard on this. I just really know that you want to thank them for their tremendous efforts in this respect. Thank you. When new technology collides with traditional sectors and established industries like manufacturing, agri-food, natural resource extraction, transportation, financial services, tourism was mentioned earlier today. Let's hear it for Colin Ferguson Travel Manitoba and the work they do. It's nice to hear somebody else say good things about Manitoba, but it's important to know we have world-class attractions here, and with that Diversity Gardens opening up, thank you, Hartley, for all your efforts as well. We will have more. We will have more, and they won't be new for that long, so let's promote the heck out of them, and let's be the destination. When we talk to the gentleman from Lonely Planet, how many million people on the website? 16 million people saw the announcement of Manitoba being in the top 10 regions in the world. 16 million people saw that. You got to give Manitoba a round of applause for that. Pretty incredible. So the gentleman from Lonely Planet said, we don't recommend places to our readers because they're popular. We recommend them to our readers so they get there before the crowds get there. That was nice to hear. It's nice to hear someone else say what we already know, that Manitoba is a blessed and beautiful place. So thank you for your efforts, all of you, for promoting Manitoba. We've got opportunities. We've got opportunities in digital and medical technologies. Creative industries are growing. We've got to be ready to respond to those opportunities so we can grow in these fields and we can grow in other fields as well. And that's why we commissioned the work of Deloitte originally and why we asked Dave and Barb to do their work. They sought the advice of more than 500 representatives of business, industry, academia, economic development organizations, Indigenous groups, tourism, people, many of you who are in this room today, and I thank you all for giving that input. Their report is the foundation for our new Economic Growth Action Plan. We are launching it today. You can view the entire, we'll not read you the entire plan. You'll be pleased to know I need you to go back, make money, and pay your taxes. But I want you to go on manitobagrowth.ca and have a look at the work, months and months of work of these people, and then give us your feedback and your comments, manitobagrowth.ca. We have achieved some success in our first 2 years of government, but there's much, much more to be done. Manitoba can be more competitive. We are diverse, but we can build on that, and we can become more prosperous. We have what it takes. We have unique economic advantages. We have a central location. We have low business costs. We have a quality of life here that is second to none. You know that, and we need to promote that within and outside of this province. Our plan has resilient strategies, that it has the governance models that we're going to be introducing that will make it work better. But it rests on the foundation of understanding that it isn't the government that makes an economy grow, it's you. And the government needs to be the partner that you deserve to have, not with a subsidy, but facilitating your opportunities to grow. This is the role. And so by delivering that long-term predictability that comes from having an economic strategy, by making sure that we have the stability, and we've worked on that in terms of our tax climate. We are just about the only jurisdiction now that has not jacked up some form of tax. As you know, we've actually entered into discussion around the opposition to proposals federally to increase taxes on small businesses, professionals, and farms. We believe that the alignment that has to happen for us to grow is important. Aligning stakeholders with governments, communities, institutions, organizations, so we ensure that we're pulling in the same direction is critical to the success of this plan. And by providing a clarity of purpose and prioritizing in the areas where we have built-in natural strengths, we have real opportunities to grow as we have been. There have been major new announcements. When I said earlier, we lead the country and have led the country now for 2 consecutive years in attracting private sector capital. Some of you would be quite aware of many of those investments. Just last week, McCain's announced an additional $75 million investment. A few months ago, we had Simplot announce the doubling of their plant. We had Raquette, a French family-owned business, does protein from peas, announcing a massive project. There are many of these projects coming to Manitoba. High Life is an important company that's expanded its services. So we're making progress in these areas, but there's much more to be done. I'm, of course, fairly competitive, as some of you know, and I don't think it's enough to be first in this area. I think we need to be further ahead of second. So that's where we need to go on capital attraction. So it takes a team to get these things done. It takes a team of people, and I know there are a number of MLAs here today, and I want to salute them and thank them and their families for their public service, and I would like to ask them if they would stand, please, and be acknowledged. Do the right things right. Replace ideology with results, build a winning culture, ask for help and listen, and grow the economy. What kind of government do you want? Bold, right? Well, that's what you've got. We're reviewing and we are acting on advice in many major files, each of the major files of government. Healthcare reforms that were long overdue and needed to be pursued are being pursued. Educational K-12 review will be underway very shortly. On child and family services, we made major improvements in our justice system as well. We're tackling every major area of government. But the economic development piece is absolutely critical because, well, after all that money we redistribute and spend has to come from somebody, and it's you. So I would say this: it isn't the elected team that is the team. Here in Manitoba, ahead of virtually every other province, the team is us. It's us. And I think we know that, quite frankly, better than most people across the country do in terms of their provinces and the way they're governed. The team is us. We're shifting away from redistribution as the role of government to expanding and growing and empowering through equality of opportunity, through innovation, through fiscal discipline, through deregulation, through focused growth strategies that we believe can work. And we focus these things on the dignity of work, on empowering individuals, on empowering the organizations that they are part of, on empowering entrepreneurs, on encouraging private sector investment. That's the how, but why? 2 years ago, I attended the United Way kickoff, and a lady spoke at it. Her name was Malofo Fofana. She's with us today, but she doesn't want the attention. But I'll just say she's an inspirational Manitoban. She came here from Liberia a little more than a decade ago. Met her husband, raised 2 boys. Her husband was stricken with cancer. He died within a short time. And she was thrust into a new world in the world that was new to her already. And she knew that there would be amazing challenges ahead, but she faced them. She went to the United Way, and the United Way offered a hand up. They said, let's teach you how to manage money. She had never managed the household finances before. And they gave her a program, and they taught her how to enter her expenses. And she had a record, and a few months later, she could see on a pie chart where her money was going. She could see where those resources that were scarce had to be managed better. And she asked her son to stand, and she said, see that shirt? Because she knew that clothing was a big thing for 2 growing boys who loved basketball. See that shirt? I made that shirt. I was deeply touched by that and inspired too. My brother and I wore homemade shirts when we were growing up. We wore homemade shirts and we were teased, but we never minded because we knew what made those shirts. Love. Love. If we can lift each other up, if we can extend a hand to people like Malofo and give her the opportunity for self-reliance and seize that opportunity with all of our neighbors and brothers and sisters in this province, we are going to have the greatest progress ever. Human creativity, human will, ingenuity, these are powerful things personified by that woman in all of us, should we choose to pursue them. It is an incredible honor for me to have the chance to speak to you today and to share some of the things that we're doing. We live at a time in human history that is, I would argue, the most blessed time in the history of humanity to live in the most wonderful country, in the most blessed province. I wouldn't be doing anything else. But I know that if we can make this province better for those who come here from all around the world, who come here from isolated communities in the north that are like another world, if we can create those opportunities for them through work, the dignity of work, that is a wonderful thing. What do we want ultimately? I think we want a province where the only limits to your station in life are the limits of your imagination. That's what we want for our children and our grandchildren, and that's what inspires me every day. Manitoba, a celebration of humanity, and thanks to you, the true home of hope for people from all over the world, right here. The only thing better than today in Manitoba will be tomorrow in Manitoba. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, have a wonderful holiday season. Thanks for all you do to build this beautiful province. God bless.